Hi, I'm Amy Karanik, and we're here in my home studio, and today we're going to make this set of a dual pendant. It's a Mokume Gane technique, and it's finished off with ice resin. So let's get started. You're going to need #1 sheets through your pasta machine of Premo in Jungle, alizarin crimson, cadmium yellow, and gold. And what I do is just cut out equal amounts from each sheet. I just use any old square cutter. The Mokume Gane blocks I make, I usually make them in squares, so the square cutter helps me think about that shape. And all I'm really trying to do is get equal amounts of each color. So this piece doesn't really matter how big it is. I used to roll out like 1 block of every color, and that kind of drove me crazy because then I had such a huge volume of product to work with, and you really don't need that. For a pendant like this, you could start out with a small amount and just go from there. I'm stacking my colors up with alizarin crimson on the bottom, and then I'm going to put gold on top. Then I already put my cadmium yellow on top of my jungle, and I'm going to put that on top of the gold. Now here's the thing, when you're Mokume Gane is a really random technique, but when you're sandwiching colors together, you want to think about what colors look like side by side and how they will look together when they're partially blended into each other. So I probably wouldn't put the alizarin crimson by the jungle, because once they're sandwiched together and partially blended, they're not going to look all that great. They won't. There won't be enough differentiation between those two dark colors to bounce off each other. So my square when I started was about 1 3/4 square, and now I'm just rolling over this with my acrylic roller, and I'm going to go until this is about 2.5 inches square. I'm just going to measure this here on my little ruler in front of me that I always have taped down on my work surface, and it's just about 2.5 inches square, and it's about 1/4 inch thick. I'll turn this to the yellow side because it's easier to see. Now go ahead and cut this into 4 sections and then restack them. And when I do Mokume Gane, I don't worry about lining my corners up. I let them fall randomly. So it's a pretty wonky stack, but that's fine. Now we're going to push on this with your hands to get the air bubbles out, just to flatten it a bit more. And then we're going to roll over it again to seal it all up. Okay, next, that time I only went, this is still about 3/8 inch thick, so I didn't reduce near as much this time. Okay, now what I want to do is put a pattern in this with my Sculpey circle cutters. And I'm just going to grab a few out here. What I'm actually doing is I'm going to impress some circles in here for a design, and I'm actually using the non-cutting side. I do that because it's I don't want to cut down through my layers. I want to push my layers of clay down like that. I'm going to skip that size and go to a bigger one. And then let's get a real big one and crisscross through here. And I'm just putting kind of a circle pattern in here. Pretty random though, really. And then I'm going to use my little 2mm tool and poke in some random dots. And I'm not pushing all the way through. I'm just pushing in probably 1/8 inch. I love Mokume Gane because you can be really random with it, or you can be really organized. And I'd say this is more of an organized pattern. So now what I want to do is form this back up. And I'm just going to do that with my fingers. And I'm going to flip it over and do it this way as well. And you can see the wells kind of closing up. I'll even roll over it just a bit to flatten my top back out. I find that kind of helps me control when I go to slice if I have a flat top on my stack. All right, I'm going to give it one more nice roll from the top, and I'm even going to kind of push it down to my silicone baking sheet so that it won't slip when I go to slice it. All right, now I'm going to take a flexible blade and just start on one side and slice through to the other side. And there we've got a really cool pattern of definite lines and dots. All right, now this piece, you could set aside and use if you'd like for something else. We might use that on the smaller pendant. This piece I'm going to roll a bit to just increase it. It's a little too thick for my deep well pendant that I have, so I'm going to thin it down just a bit by rolling gently. I want this to be just a tiny bit thinner than the sides of my pendant, and that's because I want the edges of my pendant to be a barrier for my ice resin that I'm going to pour on top later. I want it to catch the ice resin and keep it from overflowing. So I'm just going to keep going just a little bit more. And I really like that neat pattern. It's random yet organized, so you can see all those great circles in there. All right, now I want to match up one of my Sculpey circle cutters with the size of my bezel. And that one looks like almost a perfect fit. So I'm going to use it to cut out a circle from my design. And what you can do is just line this up on top of your design and decide where is the best image that you want to transfer to your pendant. So I'm going to go about right here. When I get down to the bottom, I always twist, and this time you are using the cutting edge of your circle, and lift this back up, and then I just want to see how it fits before I actually seat it in there. Okay, that looks like a perfect fit. I'm going to pull this back out now. Use my little needle tool just to pull it back out, and it's just the tiniest bit thinner than the bezel edge on my pendant. And what I'm going to do before I bake this is I'm going to put just a little bitty bit of silicone glue in here. This is a silicone glue that's specifically for glass and beads. You could also use super glue, and I usually don't with silicone glue. I usually don't smear it around, but I'm going to this time. Because I don't want there to be a lump in the bottom of my bezel that will put a lump in the clay. And then I'm just going to clean my hands with a baby wipe so I don't transfer that to the top of my clay piece. Alright, now you want to decide which way should be the top. And I'm going to go like this. And just push it down in there. Now I want to really seat it in there with my thumb, and that fits real well. Beautiful. Let's look at the smaller one. I think I'm actually going to use this thin piece that we shaved off the top for the small design, because the bezel on this small one is really thin, and you got to have that little lip on there so that your ice resin doesn't overflow. So I've got a cutter. That one is just a little too big there. I think I can make it work though. I'm going to cut out this section. Since my cutter was a little too big, I'm just going to cut this down a bit by using the edges of my cutter. And just kind of cut some of the sides off. That needs more trimming. And then you would want to put some glue in there and put this one in just like you did with the larger piece. I'm going to glue it in there first. Alright, now these are ready to bake, and once this beautiful piece is baked, then I'll show you how to put the ice resin on top to finish it. Cool now. And I'm going to put a coating over the top of ice resin so that it will look real shiny like this one. I'll show you how to do that. The ice resin comes in a dual plunger system. It has the clear glossy finish in it and a hardener. And what you do is, I'm just going to squirt out a little to show you, but you want to plunge both sides at one time by squeezing on both at the same time. And I have cut off a short paper cup. It's just easier to get the product out of the cup if it's shortened down quite a bit. Now you have to mix this for a solid minute, and I've already done that, and you can see the hardener and the gloss in there mixing together. They're kind of, one's foggier than the other. So you can see them as they mix in there, and you will need to do that for a whole minute. Alright, so I've got my cup tipped to let my product pool up down there in the corner, and I've got my my piece here, and you want your piece to sit completely flat while it's curing. So I'm going to take this bail off of here because it's actually keeping the pendant from sitting flat. So I'm just going to open the bail up with my pliers and pull that off so that the pendant sits completely flat during the drying time. This ice resin has to dry for at least 6 hours before you can touch it, and then I think it goes for at least 24 before it's fully cured. I'm using just a little square stick. You could use a toothpick, and just starting in the middle and gently easing it out toward the edges. I don't pour it on because I don't want to get too much. It's just impossible to remove product, but you can always add more. So I'm just going to keep kind of mixing it around until it gets all the way out to the edge. This stuff is wonderful. It self-levels, and it also creates sort of a little dome on the top of your piece. So you could really use it on lots and lots of different medium. And I think I have enough on there, so I'm just going to ease it all the way out to the edge. And then I'm going to let it sit overnight. And it will cure super hard and super glossy. And if you need, you can add it on in more layers. If you want to go thin and keep building it up, you can do that as well. Alright, so that's completely covered. I'm going to let that sit for at least 24 hours before I touch it. I'm just going to slide that off to the side now so that you can see how I put the pendant together. I went ahead and did that for the finished piece. I have a large circle pendant and a small one. And then the chain, you can see that my the ring on the smaller pendant is perpendicular to the art, and then the ring on the larger pendant is parallel with the art. So what I did was I just strung the chain through the smaller piece, and then strung both ends of that chain through the larger piece, and you've got this cool dangling double pendant.